Rod? You need to push your button, Rod, otherwise posterity will never know.
Rod Bailey, Chair of the Milton Neighbourhood Planning Forum.
Chris Atwell, Cabinet Member for Communities and Central Services.
Kimberly?
Kimberly Barrett, Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Environment.
Lynn Stagg, Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation.
Darren Sams, Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness.
Councillor Steve Pitt, Cabinet Member for Culture, Leisure and Economic Development.
Councillor Lee Hunt, Cabinet Member for Planning Policy and Development.
Jace?
Councillor Jason Zackley, Cabinet Member for Safety in the Community.
Matthew Williamson, Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care.
Okay, going to the further back.
It's Emily Hatton, Adult Social Care Accountant.
So you keep Andy in order and out of jail.
There are very many of them that keep Andy in order, to be honest, Leader. Andy Biddle, Director of Adult Social Care.
Tristan Samuels, Director of Regeneration.
Christina Downey, Climate Change.
James Hill, Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services.
Paddy May, Corporate Strategy Manager.
Karen Martin, Democratic Services.
Ian Maguire, Assistant Director for Planning and Economic Growth.
And Tom Southall, Assistant Director for Regeneration.
Okay, thanks. We've got apologies from Susie Horton, who is on leave. Folks, if the fire alarm goes, it's real, so please meet at Queen Victoria. And if you've signed in, sign out on your way. Please use the mics as normal. Colleagues, we've got a deputation on the making of the Milton Neighbourhood Plan. Therefore, and to courtesy, we would normally do that first. Josh, I'm sorry, we didn't ask you to introduce yourself. Josh. Well, you could always move to somewhere with a microphone, Josh. So who are you and what are you doing here, Josh? Okay. Also apologies from David Williams, who is unwell. So we're going to do the making of the Milton Neighbourhood Plan first. Ian, do you want to introduce it and then we'll go to Rod?
Thank you, members. The Milton Neighbourhood Plan, as members are aware, would form part of the development plan for Portsmouth. It has recently gone through the necessary referendum in public, held on the 18th of August, with an 88.7% vote in favour. Consequently, it now falls to the Council to make the plan, effectively adopt it into your planning policy. This is a role for full Council, and Cabinet is therefore recommended to pass the plan on to the next meeting of full Council, 11th of October, to make it as part of your development plan.
Lovely, thank you. Rod, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes starting from now.
Great. Well, clearly I'm going to be in support of the making of this neighbourhood plan. To do otherwise would be daft, really, wouldn't it, after spending 7 years trying to do it. I want to thank, actually, on behalf of the Milton residents, because 1,500 plus people actually turned out in the middle of the summer holidays to come out and vote. For us, we were a bit worried about whether people would come out in the middle of August, but they did in their numbers, and we got a vast majority. So it's great for them, it's great for me and our neighbourhood planning forum, but also the neighbourhood forum, because I've lived in Milton since 1994 and that pre-existed me, and ever since then I was going along to open forums, and it's just great that the community have supported us, because otherwise it's just daft. And I really wanted to emphasise the point. The reason we wanted to do it in the summer holidays was because we wanted to get a neighbourhood plan that the council could use for determining applications at committee by the time the phase 2 development came up. Unbeknown to us, that 2 days before, the developers of the phase 2 scheme had lodged an appeal. But nevertheless, if we can have the adoption on the 11th of October, that's great. Also, for some of the members, I wanted to just clarify something because there's been some confusion around Bransbury Park. The designation of a local green space for Bransbury Park is not there to frustrate the opportunity to deliver a swimming pool. Instead, it's the reverse, because what it's doing is it's giving an added protection for community facilities, because otherwise community facilities, when they're non-viable, we've got policies into the retention of pubs, for example. But if they're not supported, they're not viable, then they could change. But by having the swimming pool, or whatever it is that happens there, it actually means that if that becomes unviable, and who knows, in 10 years' time you've outsourced it to a private contractor, they can't come along and say, we're going bust, we're going to sell it for housing, or something else. So that community facilities could still be, I don't know, an extension of Milton Park School or something, but it is there for the community benefit, and I want to be absolutely clear, it's not there to frustrate any swimming pool. So guys, thank you, and thanks for bringing it forward too, because I've got other things I've got to be doing this afternoon. Well done, cheers.
Rod, I'm shocked that our scintillating agenda is not tying you to your seat for the next 4 hours.
I'll let you tell me what I'm missing.
Okay, thanks, Rod. Folks, I wanted to add an extra recommendation, which is recommendation 3, which is to record the Council's thanks to the members of the Milton Neighbourhood Planning Forum for their work to take this to happen. Because, as Rod says, that people have been working on this for 7 years. Colleagues, anybody else want to have a word on this? Lee, your portfolio holder, and Kimberly.
Yeah, very grateful to Rod for coming along and for understanding some of the issues that some of us have mentioned, particularly around Bransbury Park. I was very grateful to hear what I think was implied support for what we might want to do into the future for every good reason. So thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you, Leader.
Kimberly?
Thank you, Leader. The main thing I really want to say here is thank you, because it's 7 long years of work that's come to this point. And when I spoke at Cabinet about this last time, I was very specific that we have to give people their democratic right to make their choice on this plan. And that's what we did. And look what happened. We gave people the decision, and a vast majority, like you said, decided that this is how they want to go forward in Milton. And as a resident in Milton myself, obviously, I've worked with you guys with the plan as well for 7 years. It gives us all these different opportunities, and I think there's always that worry, like you said, people wouldn't come out and vote or make a decision, but the amount of people that came out was so heartwarming, and there was a lot of information that was provided as well by the Neighbourhood Forum and the Planning Forum to make sure that people would have the correct information in front of them. So I think it's just really heartwarming that so many people came out to support this plan. They understand the hard work that's gone into it. As a Milton resident, thank you. And thank you for everybody who's taken the time to go out and vote, and thank you to the neighbourhood team for putting this forward, and I look forward to it being discussed at full council.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And just to reiterate my grateful thanks as well for the work that's been done on this and the fantastic result that's come out the other side of it. I would, however, like to just, for anybody who wasn't sort of privy to the details of the process around this referendum, point out that just one of the many, many things that is clearly wrong in this country is the nonsensical system that we ended up with, that having had a bunch of community volunteers who had slavishly worked for 7 years, this council was forbidden to do anything whatsoever as a council to support them in at least advertising and making people aware that the referendum was happening. which resulted in the ward councillors across Baffins and Milton having to chuck some money in a bucket in order to be able to help them out, because why should community volunteers who've already given up their blood, sweat and tears for 7 years also have to put their hand in their pocket in order to fund such a thing? It's just ridiculous. And yet another example of how completely dysfunctional planning is in this country, in that you can get a grant as a community group to go and develop a neighbourhood plan, albeit not a great big one, but a grant, but then having achieved it after 7 years of hard work, you're not allowed to tell anybody about it unless you're prepared to pay for it personally. So I'm often frustrated by the nonsense of government, and this is yet another example that blatantly needs fixing. So Rod and the team, thank you very much for sticking through it, what was clearly a stupid process at the end, and I think remarkable that the turnout was what it was in August, but it does highlight just how important this was to the local community.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, are you happy to support this with the amended recommendation to go forward to full council? Great, thank you very much indeed. Okay, colleagues, going back to the agenda as was declarations of interest. Anybody? I have one to declare on the last item of the agenda, number 16, because I'm a direct reporter, so I shall leave at that point and hand over to Darren. Any other declarations of interest? Thanks, Rod. Thanks. Anything else? No? Okay. Colleagues, records of minutes of previous meetings, 26th July, 8th of September. Colleagues, you happy with them? Great, thank you. Item 4, climate change strategy. Christina, hello.
Hello.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I am very pleased to bring you the revised climate change strategy to Cabinet today, recommending that you approve and adopt this strategy. As a bit of context, this replaces the existing climate change emergency strategy that was developed in 2019 off the back of the Climate Emergency Declaration. And this new strategy has been updated to reflect best practice and independent reviews that have been undertaken. So this strategy is one part of the climate change puzzle here. It describes the how we will design and implement climate change actions, and how we will show our responsibility to ourselves and to Portsmouth residents and communities. It describes the climate risks to Portsmouth, our strategic priority areas and our guiding principles for delivery. Being a delivering vessel for socio-economic and environmental challenges in Portsmouth is a critical part of its design and its delivery as well. So the climate change strategy will be implemented by forthcoming annual carbon action plans that are in development, and they will be supporting our 2030 net zero carbon ambitions in Portsmouth as both a council and as a city. The carbon action plans will include specific actions to reduce our carbon in our operations and also within the city, but also build upon and maximise existing mechanisms in existing plans and contracts, as well as creating new actions that will benefit residents, organisations, businesses, and not just in terms of cold hard carbon, but in terms of home health, air quality, green jobs, biodiversity and environmental quality. And that's it. Don't need 6 minutes.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kimberly.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm so pleased that this climate strategy is before us to hopefully agree to approve today and then therefore be adopted by this council. As Christina said, it's part of a jigsaw, but with this updated strategy in front of us, it can help underpin any decision that we're making across all departments across the council. I was in a leadership course last week with other people in the same sort of position across the country last week, and it made me realise how lucky we are in Portsmouth with the departments all on board, the directorates, officers pushing this kind of strategy forward. We are quite advanced compared to a number of councils across this country, so I think we should be feeling quite proud of where we are today. I think that the foreword, it does have 3 extremely important words in the first paragraph that really speak of the journey it has taken to get here and how we continue onwards. These are important, complex and ambitious. important because this document really does highlight the urgency of climate change and the strategy that we as a council will be adopting to combat this leading up to our 2030 target. I believe it's an extremely important piece of work that I will be involved with however long I'm in this cabinet role, hopefully for a long time. Complex as well. Well, I'm sure I can turn to Christina and I think we'll both agree that, this has been a time-consuming piece of work. It has been complex and sometimes frustrating, but that's for good reason. The amount of data that has been gathered, the amount of officers involved, the modelling that's gone into this, and the sheer man hours into creating this document shows how we need to move forward now that this strategy is in front of us. Section 3 of the strategy also points out what we consider as our strategic priority areas with our aims as a council in each priority, but it goes even further than that to identify how we will need to proceed to accomplish said aims. It also, very importantly, is in line with our city vision. Page 10 onwards shows all the fantastic work we've already been undertaking to show that we have done the work, we are doing the work, and we will continue to do even more work on this. I also must highlight the word ambitious. Not many people realise, but Christina spent months bringing this report together. It's had the involvement of all portfolios, of all the directorates, and all the input from a significant amount of officers. Climate crisis is an extremely worrying issue, and we have to have involvement in this. Whether it was the IT department, to the waste team, to finance, there's been involvement on a grand scale. As an administration in the past, I'm sure many of us know that we've been accused of not being ambitious enough. I invite those who said that previously to sit down with the reports coming forward from our cabinet meetings, with this strategy and with my officers to understand the scale of importance and ambition that this really does show. So just to highlight as well, section 4.3 shows the governance and therefore the responsibility we all have together collectively, especially with the target we have to meet for 2030. There are challenges going forward. It will be difficult, but this is really something that we have to do. By having this strategy, by signing up as a council to the international policies such as the Race to Resilience, we give future generations in the city a decent chance going forward. So thank you to the Cabinet for all their involvement. Thank you to all the directors, to all the officers from all departments and all those organisations who have supported us in bringing this forward. But my biggest thank you goes to Christina. She's only been here less than a year, but look at what has already been achieved with the work that she has done in this short time. So I hope this gets approved today, and thank you everyone for your involvement, and thank you, Christina.
Okay, thanks. Steve.
Thank you, Leader. While Kimberly Barrett was at the training course, on the training course she was on last week, which was ironic in a way, because I was standing in for her in speaking and trying to get a work stream going with Christina at a Shaping Portsmouth event, which was actually very impressive because a number of the key players in the city, the key employers, and a whole range of other sizes of business, from micros involving just sort of one person through to SMEs, we're all discussing how they as a business community can help the city to meet those net zero targets by 2030, because it's important to recognise that the climate emergency motion that we passed deals with scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3 emissions, which in simplistic terms is the carbon that we're responsible for, the carbon that we indirectly are responsible for, and then the carbon that's in our supply chain. It's more complex than that, but in layman's terms. But then that leaves a whole bunch of other stuff. What came out of that meeting last week, there were some companies there who are specialists in advising business and councils around sustainability and the climate agenda. And more than one of them said how lucky Portsmouth was to have a council that was so forward-thinking, and particularly praised the work that happens by the Switched On Portsmouth team, and how useful that is. And, you know, there was people in the room saying, I need somebody to give me unbiased advice around the best way to go and procure solar panels, and the answer was Switched On Portsmouth. And Switched On Portsmouth was the answer to an awful lot of the questions raised that day, and it just goes to show that this new piece of work, working between council and shaping and that business community that they help to represent, can play a key part in adding to all the work that we as a council are doing around Scope 1, 2 and 3 to try and reduce the overall carbon footprint of Portsmouth down as near as we possibly can to that net zero target by 2030. There's a lot more to do, but it is really important that we recognise that as a council on our own, we are limited in the impact that we can have, but by incentivising and mobilising our communities, especially our business community, there are significant impacts we can have. I think it's something like 80% of global emissions are in one way or another connected to business. And therefore business is a key sector here that we need to be influencing. And there was a lot of inspirational talk in the room. That's now set up as a working group, and they're going to be moving that forward in partnership with the council. So great to see that new strand being added. I know it's something that Councillor Barrett's wanted to see for a long time, and I thank her for inviting me to go along and take part in that launch event with Christina, and we did our best to stand in for you. But promising times ahead and a lot of work still to be done.
Thanks very much. I have a question, Christina. Action plan. When will it appear?
Well, they're developed.
Next week?
We are waiting for internal input from them. And
from whom?
Mostly building services, but I think you'll appreciate they are extremely busy right now.
I'm sure James will be inserting the relevant thing into the relevant person to make sure that something happens quickly. Okay, thanks. Lynn.
Thank you. Transport, as I'm sure everybody knows, is a major contributor to air pollution and with it CO2 emissions for leading to climate change. So I've worked quite closely with Kimberley on joining forces on tackling some of the problems. We aim to change behaviour. That's what we have to do. We have to decrease the dependence on the motor vehicle. That's not to say we need to cut out cars completely, not at all, but if people can use them less often and perhaps have fewer cars. But for those, we need alternative forms of transport that people can use, and that means things like public transport. We were very lucky. We secured £56 million in grant funding to improve the road network, particularly for buses, so creating more bus lanes, which will mean quicker journeys uninterrupted by cars, traffic jams, etc. So that hopefully will encourage more people to use buses and less the cars less. Encourage active travel. We're creating more and more cycle paths and to create a cycle network so that it's safer for more people to use cycles to get around rather than cars. And we've put in a lot of EV charging points for people who are changing their vehicles from petrol or diesel to electric vehicles. However, I was at a Transport of the South East meeting yesterday, and we were talking about air pollution, obviously, and climate change. And if we carry on the way we are, this is not just Portsmouth, this is the South East, if we carry on the way we are without any real changes, we're unlikely to achieve our target of net zero by 2030. In fact, the gap between what we want to achieve, what we're aiming to achieve, net zero, and the reality will be 48%. So we've still got a long way to go. So I think that message needs to get out. Obviously, what Kimberley is doing within her portfolio is helping. There's loads of things that people can do to help, but it needs to be everybody in everybody's minds that we have to cut the emissions that we're producing. Thank you.
Well, Lynn, and my thanks to your department for two things. First is electric vehicle charging points outside of London. We're the only one council is better than us out of 300. So we've got 59% of people are within a 5-minute walk of an EV charging point. And as a proud owner of an EV car, I am very grateful to you for that, so that we don't produce air pollution. And secondly, my thanks for changing the rules on the bus passes so that people can go a little earlier, and so at 9 o'clock instead of 9:30 if you're a pensioner. But really importantly for people, because there are so many people who have to have who get a very early appointment to QA, that if they got a letter from QA, they can use their bus pass at any point to get up there, so that we don't have people having to go by car or cancelling their appointments because they just can't get there. So many thanks for that. Lee, and then we'll move along.
All right. So nobody should be under the impression, Leader, that we're patting ourselves on the back and it all kind of like stops here and we're done. And we haven't. So, for example, when the city local plan comes along, we're going to see a lot more policies, particularly around insulation in homes, because the theory is now we're moving away from creating energy via solar panels, for example, to reducing the energy produced by insulating homes better. So this council is always looking forward, it's very progressive. Because we know we're on the edge of it, you know, the sea level's going to rise about 70 centimetres, perhaps in a very short space of time. And we know that flooding is a risk. And we have a lot of challenges to come too because of the government's housing targets. This is inevitably going to bring, despite what plans come forward, more cars and activity. So the things we hear from Councillor Stagg about buses, more buses, greener buses running on electricity and not polluting, all these things combining with everything that Kimberly and Christine have done in this report, we are very, very keenly aware of how important it is to our city in particular and to its residents, the safety of their businesses and their homes, which is why we must also complete the sea defences as quickly as we can. And I hope to see that resolved, or at least the way forward resolved, partially at least, at the next council meeting.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Lee. Okay, colleagues, you happy with this, everybody? Thank you very much indeed. Welcome, Brian, Councillor Brian Madgwick. Nice to see you. Do you want to push your thing just to introduce yourself so for the record you are here? Nice to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, colleagues, let's move on to PCC support for National Migration Programme. Paddy.
Thank you, Leader. This report provides information on the range of migration schemes that we in Portsmouth are involved with or are supporting. Within the council, we're trying to tie things together. I think it's fair to say that nationally, the range of schemes, the different rules, they're a bit of a mess, but locally we're trying to coordinate and try to make the schemes more efficient. In terms of the recommendations, there's a recommendation to note the content of the report. There's also a recommendation to thank staff across the council and our partners that have actually been involved in setting up and running the schemes, often at very short notice. And I said they're really quite complicated and actually can be quite confusing for people that are involved with them as migrants and so forth. The final recommendation is agreeing that under the Homes for Ukraine scheme, if a guest moves into the private sector, which they can do before the 12 months of the programme, at that point the programme is deemed that they've left the programme, but we should still be prepared to support them if they need it, rather than saying that they've left the programme and therefore no longer qualify for the support. So that's the final recommendation.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Darren.
Thank you, Gerald. A combination of praise and a plea. Delighted to support the recommendations that are in this paper, and I'm delighted this paper's here because it brings into the public domain the sort of things that many of us as local councillors and as council officials have known for months, which is simply around the chaos. Paddy has been very polite. The chaos amongst much of the arrangements that we are doing to try and help people who are fleeing conflicts around the world, and the work we're trying to do to try and make some sense of it. It is the hallmark of a civilised society that we should help people who are in the most pain and in the most trouble. I'm delighted that this council has been leading the country in terms of that. Talking to Afghan interpreters who laid down, in some cases, their lives, but thankfully there's some of those people who are here, their livelihoods to try and help our armed forces. They needed help, and we stepped up, and with the Ministry of Defence we provided that help. And I know from talking to some of them how grateful they are that they're here and how their lives are improved. The unfortunate thing for many other Afghans is that they're in hotels. And that's not an acceptable thing. They need safe and secure accommodation. And that's why I'm delighted this paper has come here. And this is where my plea comes in, which is that we have done a lot as a city to make sure that we have a civilised approach. And frankly, it's now the turn of other councils to stump up their fair share. Because we have to do this together. If you're fleeing conflict in Afghanistan, or you're fleeing conflict in Ukraine, or you're fleeing potential conflict in Hong Kong, and I'm delighted that 30 years after Liberal Democrats said that we needed help to support people in Hong Kong, that is finally happening. You need to make sure that the place is safe and that you are safe. And too often, too many authorities choose not to do that for their own reasons. It's only fair that they should. We've been putting ourselves forward, and I hope that they do too. My final point is around the third point, which is for the Ukrainian families. I know from speaking to some people are housing Ukrainian families in Baffin's, which is the area I represent, that they need that level of security, they need that level of support that is in this paper today. So delighted to support move, I suppose, the recommendations, Gerald, but a plea that other councils should do the civilised thing and take their fair share of people too. Otherwise, too many people are going to be in hotels for too long. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. I think two quick things from me. First is the two different Ukrainian schemes are nuts. Having one where people get support and one where you don't get support is ludicrous. I've been supporting a family, a mum and two kids, who came in on the scheme to stay with family, but it wasn't family, it was a mate, and they get no support whatsoever. And if it had been me with my two kids, I would have signed anything to get us out of a war zone, as I think everybody would have done. And I think the other issue we've got is the government's support for unaccompanied minors is okay when they remain 18. When they stop being 18, then the government support goes, but we still have to pick it up. So we're carrying a cost pressure of £1 million that we have to find from not doing other things to support those kids until they're 25. And because that's what the rules are, and the government don't give us financial support for that, and that's a real problem, which governments seem completely deaf to. Paddy, thank you very much indeed for the report. Colleagues, are you happy with this? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to the report of joy and happiness, Chris Ward, Revenue Support Budget Monitoring, sorry.
Thank you, Leader. Thanks for that introduction, by the way. So this is your Q1 budget monitoring report, so it reports on the Council's overall financial position.
Paddy, if you're not here for anything else, if you want to run away, you're more than welcome to run away. Okay, fine. It just might, the rest of the meeting might not be scintillating. Christopher, be scintillating.
Okay, this item accepted, of course. So this is your Q1 budget monitoring report. It reports on the financial position of the Council to the end of June. As you'll appreciate, and as is well known, and this council, alongside other councils, will be in a particularly financially challenged position at this time. There are three key factors that are driving the challenge, which is the inflationary impact on the council, the rise in demand for services as a consequence of the cost of living crisis, and of course we still are experiencing the legacy impact of COVID in certain areas of the council. In overall terms, at the end of Q1, the forecast for the council's revenue budget was a £3 million overspend, but underlying that position, which has not been formalised yet, is the pay offer by the employers, which, if we factor in the current pay offer, would turn the council's forecast overspend position to £6.8 million. That's obviously a forecast to the end of the financial year. The reasons for those variances are set out within the report itself. I think it's important to understand that the £6.8 million forecast overspend is actually relying on contribution from the council's contingency of 4.8 million. So the 6.8 million forecast overspend is after having funded 4.8 million pounds worth of exceptional costs that the council's experiencing in the current year. At this stage, the council has sufficient financial resilience to be able to accommodate that £6.8 million, but it will be a stretch for the council, and that would be accommodating it from the council's corporate contingency. If we consider the impact of the current pressures on the council in the current year and what that might mean for future years, our assessment at this stage is that at least £4.5 million of that will continue into future years. So some of it is temporary by nature and some of it has an ongoing impact. So that's obviously a factor that would have to be brought into any consideration and preparation of future years' budgets and future years' financial forecasts for the council. The capital programme is also challenged, as you would expect, and it's set out in the report. We have additional costs and reduced funding that could impact on the council's overall financial position in capital terms by up to 8.6 million. Obviously that's a forecast at this stage, and there are a number of reviews ongoing in relation to certain capital schemes that may have the opportunity to bring that sum down. In any event, our early forecast of the funding that might be available next year reveals that resources of around about 9.1 million might be available. That clearly only gives about £500,000 worth of headroom, potentially, between the funding available for next year and the funding requirement for the current year. There's a recommendation, therefore, in the report that the Cabinet, as a precautionary measure, seek to identify, or at least plan at this stage, to put on hold £3 million worth of existing capital schemes in the event that that situation comes to pass, and that the Council therefore would have the opportunity to use that funding as part of next year's capital investment priorities. Any questions? Happy to answer.
Thanks, Chris. And inevitably, this is just the end of Q1, and we'll need to see how things develop over time, but it's very sensible to be keeping a very close eye on it. And I know other places are having significant pressures. I know there's a report from Southampton that their children's social care budget is overspent by 9 million already, and so that they've got significant problems. I just want to do a change to recommendation 7, which is just to add the words at the end of this, unless potential costs of capital projects fall. So just want to make sure if things fall, if costs fall, we don't need to find so many savings to balance it, but I think it's best to look at both things. Is that okay with you, Chris?
Yes, that's good. Thanks, Leader.
Colleagues. Okay. Is everybody happy with this? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, item 7, Chris, on my running order it says Natasha will introduce this, but we are Natasha-less, but James will. Are you going to pretend to be Natasha?
I'll just stay as I am, because the report also carries my name and indeed Tristan, so So thank you, Leader and Cabinet. What you have before you then is an information-only report. It was drafted and is presented to you on behalf of the Civic Office Member Working Group, which is a group convened and chaired by Councillor Atwell on your collective behalf. And in drafting the report, it was not only shared clearly with that group, but also with yourselves, Cabinet and group leaders. The report before you then updates you on the progress of the work following the full council notice of motion earlier in this year, and the progress to date in considering the important decision around the future use of the civic offices. The report contains all of the kind of working, if you will, of that working group. The working group's met 4 times, and you'll see in the report that it's considering what is quite a highly complex range of information in trying to seek a decision on the future of the civic building, and there is still much work to do. The report, though, does draw your attention to some key parameters and principles that the group are agreeing, which will provide some structure going forward as you consider the future options for the civic building. Although the report doesn't contain any recommendations, in the next steps it draws your attention to a request from the working group that full council continue to support the work, and in doing so there's an opportunity to consider the membership of the working group. Do we have the right range of officers and indeed members represented in the working group? And the intention then for the group is to bring back to Cabinet and full council no later than the end of the financial year a report which will provide you with all you need to consider the various options and take a decision with regard to the future of the civic building.
Great. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of thanks from me, actually. I think the report is a result of some good and honest cross-party working. I'd like to thank colleagues from other groups who've come along to meetings and worked in a collegiate and constructive way. I think we now do have a sense of perhaps the direction of travel, and I think that's probably been long overdue. So thank you to everybody who has helped us get to this point. I hope Cabinet recognise the progress that's been made over the last couple of months and will support the report going forward. Thank you to the report's authors, Megan, Meredith and Tom, and to Natasha, Tristan and James for their support and advice over these past couple of months.
Okay, colleagues, you happy with this piece of work to carry on? Jace?
Just one quick question in regards to the timescale. Do we believe that's realistic?
I think it's entirely realistic. James, are you less optimistic than me?
No, I think it is realistic. It reflects a conversation at the last working group, which took account for where we are now and what we need to do next. It may well be that we need to bring you some interim reports, which may well consider third-party support, but we're not quite there yet. But certainly we will have many of the options considered by that deadline.
Okay, thanks. Colleagues, are you happy with this? Yep, okay, thanks very much indeed. Item 9 then is forward plan and mission and caution development site. Colleagues, are you happy for us to look at this? This is a piece of urgent work that we need to get done. Colleague, are you happy with that? Thank you very much indeed. So, Tom, do you want to talk us through?
Thank you, Leader. So, the report you have in front of you essentially updates recommendations that were put to you in February of last year in a report of the same name. As an aide-memoire to that, the report is attached to Appendix 1 and the background to the opportunity in caution is spelled out in sections 3.2 onwards in the report. So since last February, since the last report, work has continued between the parties, so that's Portsmouth City Council, the Fire Authority and the Police Authority. That work's been focusing around the acquisition and disposal matters between them. Clearly, time has elapsed, and as you'll see detailed in the report in sections 313 through to 319, there has been a slight change of approach and change of circumstance for the parties. Now, essentially, these changes in approach give rise directly to the recommendations you're seeing before you, specifically 2.2, 2.3, 2.4 and 2.5. In short, that there is the recommendation on disposing of the PCMI site immediately to the fire authority to enable them to get on and construct their new facility. But also importantly, empowering officers to negotiate and agree appropriate terms to secure development through acquisition or otherwise the existing fire and police station sites. I'm conscious there's quite a raft of information with this report contained in the appendices, and I will do my best to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, Steve.
Yes, thanks, Leader. Things do change, and we find ourselves in a slightly different position than we previously anticipated, and therefore I think it's entirely pragmatic to ensure that the most important thing that is currently on the table, which is the provision of a brand new fire station for the north of the city in Cosham on the former PCMI site, is able to progress. We know that building costs have gone up hugely over the last 18 months or so, and therefore it is essential that they're able to progress as quickly as possible. In simple terms, the rest of it can be sorted out down the road as long as everyone's still willing to come to the table and pursue those discussions, and we have every reason to believe at this stage that that is the case. So we certainly don't want to do anything that could jeopardise the provision of a new fire station in the north of the city. It will be of great benefit to the city as a whole, and as we know, the fire service has suffered significant cuts over recent years, and anything that enables them to work as effectively as possible, I'm sure, will be greatly appreciated by the residents of Portsmouth in helping to keep them safe. So that being the priority, this report enables that to happen, and it means that we can still move forward on other areas and assembling the land as appropriate over time. I must add, for public record though, my concerns that the NHS Property Co do actually enter into that with the spirit that is intended by the One Public Estate procedure, and don't just go for whoever is prepared to offer the most money. I realise that's going to upset them. I don't care. They've done it before. They need not to do it again, and we need to hold their feet to the fire to make sure that they play fairly with their other public sector partners.
Okay, thanks very much indeed for that. Steve, I completely agree with you, and I think what we might need to do is to do briefing for both the local MPs about the issue, because if bits of the public sector don't work together, then that's going to cause a real problem. And we have evidence from St James's that the NHS Property Company really aren't that interested in supporting other public sector entities, while the council is doing its level best to enable the fire service to have a new fire station built at Cosham in a much better location, and taking a financial hit to do that. So we are playing ball and doing the right thing, and we've got to make sure that NHS does the same.
Leader, just very sorry to interrupt you, but for the record, bearing in mind that Josh is here representing local press today, the NHS Property Company is not the NHS. We are not criticising the NHS in any way, shape or form. These are the people that control the buildings, etc., and they sometimes seem to have a very different agenda than the NHS itself.
But they are run by ministers, and therefore ministers can tell them how to operate, either to support public services or not. I think the other bit is I think it's really important that the fire station in Cosham is at the end of life, and we need a new fire station there to provide protection for local people. I think it is right that we remember and regret the decision of our Labour councillors to choose to sell that off to somebody else, so there would be no new Cosham fire station. And they sat in this chamber and voted to do that, and that was wrong, and it was completely wrong. And I'm very pleased that we decided that that was not the right way to go across the council, because the people in the north of the city deserve decent services, and they deserve a new fire station, and I'm really pleased the City Council is doing everything we can to make sure that happens. Matt.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Pitt. I think I was involved, I think, in the very first meeting about some of the regeneration in Cosham, and some really exciting and well-needed plans for regeneration of that area, and also, as we've just been discussing, the provision of new essential public service locations, and not least the fire station, which, as a former fire authority member, I know how important that is, and indeed, as part of adjacent to another development site we're doing in terms of extra care accommodation, is something that we've already got this kind of movement in that area in Cosham, and this can add to it. I think what this brings out, though, and as the Leader of the Council has said, is that where certain parts of the public sector don't work with other parts or put in barriers, which means that you have to adjust your approach like this in an unexpected way, is that you don't really get the opportunity to do a full and comprehensive work on how everything can connect together as well as possible. And as a result of some of the lack of coordination, because some people have decided to start messing around, is that there are essential services that are not going to be able to go forward at this time, including some healthcare, brand new healthcare facilities in that area, and indeed some really good ideas for community spaces as well, which means that the only people who suffer are the people of Cosham and Wimmering, who no longer have that opportunity to have really good services on their doorstep because of some parts of the public sector are messing around. Whereas when we were putting this together in the first place a few years ago, I think it was about 2018, that it was all being done in a collaborative way, and a way that was sensible and forward-looking. So my plea today would be for all of those public sector organisations that are involved in this, in Cosham regeneration generally, please stop messing around, start talking to us and being honest, and not changing your minds at the slightest drop of a hat, because we are here for the people of Cosham and Wimmering and the wider area as well in the north of the city to do the very best for them, and you really do need to collaborate together rather than doing things for your own purposes that then mean that you cannot deliver a fully thought out scheme where it all fits together. So I thank the officers for this updated report. I completely support the approach of moving forward straight away with the fire station, and I do hope that the rest of the regeneration and the public sector partners can get their act together and work with us to do the very best for the people of the city.
Okay, thanks folks. Is everybody happy with the recommendations here? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Andy, we come down to your two reports of unalloyed joy. Are you going to do them together or separately?
Happy to do them together, Leader, if that suits. I think the first one probably is less doom-laden than most of the reports that we bring to you. So talking about the carers leave bill. So the papers for you, the purpose of the paper is to inform of this bill that's going through Parliament currently, and recommend that Cabinet support and formally endorse the bill. Going through the report, Section 3 highlights the work that Carers UK undertake and gives some statistical information around the impact of unpaid carers in our society and the impact that caring can have on their lives. Moving over leaf in Section 3, this also describes the bill, what it set out to do and the potential impact for carers, and links that impact to what carers have told Carers UK as a nationally acknowledged expert in the field. And then moving through page 2 in Section 4 sets out the reasons for recommending that Cabinet support the bill in Parliament, and talks about the potential benefits of retaining carers in the UK workforce,
by enabling unpaid leave when they need it. And then section 4, going into page 3, then goes on to describe some of the work that we do in Portsmouth City Council and the local interest that we have in retention in our workforce and enhancing our reputation as an employer. It's fair to say, true to say, that when we're talking about carers as Portsmouth residents, we're also talking about carers in our workforce, over 50% of whom are Portsmouth residents.
Actually, Andy, let's do them separately because they are very different. So, Matt, do you want to come in on this one?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Andy, for the report. And this was brought to my attention a few months ago now, actually, and that this was coming through, and it is a really important thing for us to support as an administration, and especially as a Liberal Democrat administration, as this is a Liberal Democrat MP that's putting this forward, which I'm very proud of, Wendy Chamberlain, our MP for North East 5. This is something that, it is a shame actually, this has had to wait, it's had to take a private member to bring this forward. It was in the Conservative government's manifesto in 2019 that they were elected on, as they love to remind us, but they brought nothing forward in terms of bringing forward carers leave, a statutory right to carers leave. So it's left to a Liberal Democrat MP to do so. It's the bare minimum, the carers leave, because to be honest, this is what the government said. It's what we think we can get through, and I really hope when it comes to second reading on the 21st of October, that's what it does. But anything that makes that gives carers the right to have their circumstances taken into account of is massively important. As Andy's mentioned in the report, it says about the benefit it gives to retention of employment of people who are carers, but it also therefore means that there is reduced costs for employers, because it means that they don't have to go out and recruit replacement staff. It means they don't have to train new staff. It means that they can make the very best use of their existing caring staff. And as again it mentions in the report, as Carers UK are putting forward in their case, is that it means that you also have the opportunity for some employers to really take the positive move, as we know always happens in these kind of circumstances, and says, actually, we think this is really important and we're actually going to make investments into our carers. So this is a really important report. It could make a massive difference to people in our city, rather than it be left to an ad hoc and on a case-by-case basis, and hoping that employers do the right thing just to do the right thing. But with our excellent carer service we do anyway, where we support the carers as a council through our carers centre and through the other organisations that work with carers as well. If this bill goes through, then it would be brilliant. So I call on both our MPs to formally support the bill, to make a plea to the government to support it as well, so it gets to its third reading and therefore can move forward and be implemented, and therefore also, of course, live up to their manifesto commitment. Let's hope that this isn't another year zero situation where they say everything that's come before has gone. And I ask you, us all, if we can formally support this as an administration on behalf of Portsmouth City Council.
Okay, it seems a remarkably sensible thing to do. Everybody happy with that? Yep. Okay, thank you very much. Andy, take two.
Thank you, Leader. So the next report in front of you is about adult social care funding reform. The purpose of the report is to provide...
So, Andy, again, I'm sorry, I disapprove of the title. It's not reform, it's change. Reform gives the impression that this is going to be better when we know it's going to be worse. So, because the government call it reform, it doesn't mean that you have to parrot whatever Jacob Rees-Mogg says.
I try never to parrot, Leader, and you're quite right. We did actually change the title to Adult Social Care Funding Change, so my apologies, I overlooked that one. I'm afraid it's been called reform for so long, it sort of gets into the psyche, but we'll immediately deal with that.
So the purpose of the report is to provide members with an update on the proposed changes to the funding arrangements for adult social care as set out in the government's recent white paper, Build Back Better, Plan for Health and Social Care, and the action being taken by the Council to prepare for those changes. There are 4 key components: a cap on the amount that any individual can spend on their personal care over their lifetime, a more generous system of means testing, more generous to the individual, an enactment of Section 18.3 of the Care Act to enable eligible individuals to ask for the local authority to arrange their care in the pursuit of gaining a more favourable price for that care, and a fair cost of care to be established to support providers of care. The report focuses on the first 3 items as we took a report on the fair cost of care to the portfolio meeting in July of this year. Moving in section 4 of the paper, there's greater detail on each of those proposed changes, and we've also set out details of the requirement on the local authority to maintain a care account record for each person who presents themselves to us. Section 5 provides information of the potential financial and resource impact of those changes, and paragraph 5.3 highlights some of the national concerns that the funding proposed by central government to support the implementation and operation of the reforms will be insufficient. The County Council network and a company called Newton have estimated that there could be a burden of up to an additional £10 billion required over the next 10 years in addition to the sum of money that's been set aside nationally to pay for this. The financial and resource impact of these reforms for the City Council are currently uncertain. We haven't seen the final financial calculations. The 2 main areas of uncertainty for us are the number of people who fund their own care, who may come forward to utilise the benefits from the changes, and the impact arising from the more generous means test, as that will depend on individual financial circumstances, so it's difficult to get an aggregate view of those based on those 2 things. In section 6 of the report, there are details of the actions that we're taking to implement the changes within Portsmouth, and Appendix 1 of the report sets out the 8 things that the trailblazers, those authorities who are implementing early, think that we can all be doing now, and what we've done is put a brief progress report summary against each of those changes. So that's a summary of the report, but as usual, happy to take any questions.
Great. Matt?
Thank you very much. And thank you, Andy, and your team for putting this together. And more to the point, thank you all so much for all the work you've done in preparing us for these changes that are coming down the line and are going to be continuing to do as they come on stream in the next few months and years. This is rather a difficult reports for us to have at Cabinet, not least because this really is yet another one of these many things that we get from governments, especially it would appear in adult social care and indeed children's social care, where we get additional things to do, additional burdens, and we're not going to get funded properly for it. Which is the concern, as Andy has mentioned, from the County Council network in Newton, and in even more concern, as we found out last week, where the national insurance rise that was specifically going to be ring-fenced to health and social care, so the health and social care levy is no longer happening, and we have just been told that it's going to be from general taxation. Whatever that means, there's no detail to that. It's just it's going to come from general taxation. So it's very difficult. As Andy's again said, we've got real uncertainty in terms of self-funders. One of the issues over the years has been where we literally have no idea how many self-funders there are in anywhere in the country. And therefore, the amount of them who might take up the opportunity for the council to source their care for them, even if they'll still be self-funding, is a huge unknowable, and the impact on our providers is of some real concern. And we really don't know the impact that's going to have in terms of will we have providers who go out of business, and obviously the huge impact that would have on the finances of the council and indeed of other providers who might have to backfill for it. So this is a huge amount of uncertainty that's been put forward by these changes. Our team, I know, are working as hard as they possibly can to make sure we are prepared for it. We have put additional resources into making sure we're prepared for it within adult social care. But at the same time, as with so much of this, there's so much unknowable. So I commend this report in terms of its clarity and its candour. But what I can't say is that it's actually particularly clear on what impact these things will have ultimately. We do just know that it will unfortunately likely be negative impacts from here. And again, this comes down to governments changing the way funding works for local authorities in the social care sector and not funding it properly. And this happens time and time again. And I am sick to death of it, to be honest, because how many times are they going to do this and make us suffer locally, whereas nationally they just keep borrowing money, hand over fist, to give away in tax cuts when we've got all these things. There are going to be authorities going to go under because of these changes, and we're not going to be one of them, but others will. So thanks for the report. Thanks for all the work that all the team's doing, and we just will work through this as best as we can.
Okay, thanks. A really helpful briefing, Andy, and I know other councils are feeling it as badly as we are, but we just have to suffer with what the government imposes on us. Okay, colleagues, you happy with that to accept the recommendations? Thank you. Item 13, violence against women and girls. Caroline, welcome. You couldn't, you need just to bring the microphone down a bit so that you connect to it.
Can you hear me better?
Much better. Otherwise, your words are not kept for posterity.
That's right. It may have been what went wrong last time. This is a noting paper providing an update to an approved recommendation from March this year to include a direct question relating to the safety of women and girls within this year's Community Safety Survey. Whilst this report focused on the newly added question, women's experience of antisocial behaviour and general fear of crime were also considered within the main Community Safety Survey, and a full report of the survey will be brought at a future meeting. Public sexual crime does disproportionately affect women, younger women, with the majority of crimes committed in public spaces in 2021 being to women aged under 24 years. The age 18 to 24 year group within the Community Safety Survey just undertaken were slightly underrepresented. That said, the main finding within the report is that women consistently reported feeling less safe than men in a number of areas of the city, during the day and more so at night. The difference was significant. In particular, in and around the city centre, Commercial Road area and Somers Town. Overwhelmingly, female participants felt that more lighting, CCTV, regeneration of the city centre, more security and police would make a difference. The survey didn't ask about women and girls' safety within the nighttime economy, and we're going to continue to work with our partners to look at how best to do this. Asking the question within the Community Safety Survey provides us with an opportunity to track the trend data over time, as we have done with many crimes. There are also a number of things that we are doing to address the issue of safety towards women and girls in public places, and we're doing those in partnership with police and the OPCC and other stakeholders, and these include actions like the Safer Streets programme.
Okay, thanks. Jason?
Not a great deal, Chair, but just to basically say the report highlights the progress that we've made, gives an insight into the concerns and fears of some of the female residents within the city. As you'll read from it, we've been quite lucky in being, well, say lucky, we've been fortunate, I think, based upon the capability of the reports that we've submitted, to be successful in 3 rounds of previous funding, and this to the tune of 1.6 million, which is a very useful amount of money to receive into the city to tackle what's a concerning topic and issue, one that fortunately seems to be supported by all parties across the political spectrum. We are where we are. The work will be ongoing. I think previous colleagues have mentioned, recorded their thanks to various officers from their portfolio. I think I'd just like to do the same. I've only had the portfolio since May, but it's been very useful to see firsthand since that time the capability of the officers that we've got within that particular portfolio, Caroline being the lead one that I deal with. So just to reiterate once again my thanks to her and for other members of the Safety in the Community portfolio for the efforts they've done, and I hope we continue to achieve much further success. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, anything to add to that? No, thank you very much indeed, Caroline. That's much appreciated. Item 14, appointment of LGBTQ+ Young People's Member Champion. Meeting happening for the young people on the 12th of October, so we'll be informed after that date of who they select that they want as their champion. And well, the way we've done it in the past is that we've waited for them. Okay, I'm just going to do the exclusion of press and public and then hand over to Darren, and at which point I will disappear. So, colleagues, are you happy to move into the exclusion of press and public for item 16? Was that a yes? Yes, good. Okay, hand over to Daz.
Okay, thank you. I think you've got I'll start when you're out of here, Gerald, if that's right. Take your time, don't worry.